All right, and I'll just keep monitoring this room for a few minutes, and I'm going to share my screen now. All right. All right. Everybody can see the Jamboard, I assume. And one thing I would like to preface is that these are blank because I don't intend to speak a lot on these pages. So when you're making a point or asking a question, I'm going to throw it on a Jamboard post-it, so it stays on here. So when the presentation is done, you have this video that you can share with your teams with all these different conversation points on it. So you can actually, if you want to, even take the Jamboard and share it. So you can just use the Jamboard as your own conversational piece. Because I know sometimes what you get out of a webinar doesn't really translate when you get back into the local team meeting. So hopefully it can be a tool that you can use for your campus conversations. So my name's Tony DePreto, and I work at St. Andrews Episcopal School in Mississippi. I was overseas for a little over 16 years and worked in Japan, the UAE, China, and South Korea before coming back here. So I've seen pretty much every school information system combination you can possibly imagine, even some that they don't really even sell in the United States. So I feel like I've just been doing this on a regular basis since 2009. And the reason I want to do this webinar is I also do some consulting work, and I do Powerschool customization on the side. Usually in the summer, I'll do a contract for school to build something out for them in Powerschool, or to help them clean up the system. Maybe they have a lot of data errors or something, or they need help with scheduling, because I can do Power Scheduler work. And over the last year, I have on 4 occasions seen schools that I would say are well developed, have really good IT personnel, good leadership, they've been running for years, make the same mistake with school information system switching. And that's going to be kind of my focus on this screen, and then I will turn it over to our first question. So the mistake that I am seeing, and this isn't brand related, I try to stay brand agnostic, is they're making a huge mistake in their data size and complexity. When you start programming or teaching programming, one of the first things you teach new programmers is this concept here. If you have a container that you're storing information in, if that container is very small, you can move its information into any one of these. But if this is your container and then you switch to a smaller container, the contents won't move. So I have seen schools who have a very large Powerschool implementation. Maybe it's 10 years old. They have dozens of modules. They're using Power Scheduler every year to finish their scheduling. And they switch to something like Veracross that is missing like 50% of the modules they need and doesn't have a scheduler. So when that happens, they literally freeze. Their business continuity stops. They literally can't move forward, and they end up running 2 systems side by side. And the reason that they contact someone like me is they want to know if there is a way to start feeding information from Powerschool to Veracross directly, or if there's some kind of middle process they can use to translate this stuff faster, because they have set up a system that requires 1 or 2 employees to translate data between the systems every week via Excel or a spreadsheet of some kind. So this happened 4 times in a year. So I thought, this is odd. I've been doing this a long time. I haven't really seen this trend. What's going on? So for me, the main thing for evaluating your school information system is to look at your data size. How much data do you have, and what kind of database are you using? And is it going to be physically compatible with your new system? So let's say that you have something like Blackbaud and you're running a health module. Does your new system have a health module? because it's going to be really difficult to move health data into a database without a health module. Does that make sense? So when you're looking at these types of moves, doing this like comparative list is very important. Scheduling. If you have a scheduling system built into your SIS, if it's not a third-party system that works with multiple SISs, you're probably going to need to either find a third party or do a scheduling comparison. So Powerschool, for example, has Power Scheduler, and Power Scheduler is separate software, like it's its own engine inside of Powerschool. People who use it, when they switch to other systems, they have to switch their scheduling or they have to keep a license for Powerschool. So it's important to not just say, does it have scheduling, but to look at the features. And if you don't have a decent match on features, then that needs to be something you consider. Like that's a third-party add-on you're going to need to include. Business modules. If your SIS is connected to finance, fundraising, or payments, those systems need to be either compatible with your new SIS or your new SIS has to have something else. So payment systems and getting people onto new payment systems is a headache. If you have fundraising with alumni, moving alumni to a new system is tough. You don't have a lot of contact with them. You don't want to annoy them. This is something that you definitely need to consider. Grading options, GPAs, etc. If you've used the big SIS, like even Admin Plus, like, and I say even Admin Plus because I've always seen it as kind of like lagging in kind of modernization. It may not now, but just I always kind of fought with them about just where they were headed with their roadmap. So Admin Plus, Blackbaud, Powerschool, they all have a lot of customization within the GPA and grade calculations. And that means there's a lot of customization with how you can produce transcripts and other reports and how you can store historical data. They have all these features. Some school information systems don't have a lot of options for GPAs, for grading, for doing historical records. So that's another thing to look at, because again, you know, you're responsible for being able to produce legal documents for students who graduate. Like you need to be able to produce a document that says they went here are their grades, here's their GPA. And if you have a situation where you change your school information system, but the value of your grades change and you can't quite balance that out, then you're going to have to change your internal grading policies and procedures to align with your school information system. And someone in your school will say the tail is wagging the dog. That will happen. So that is a prediction that I can guarantee. Report types. Different school information systems define reports differently. It's important to ask them, like, what do you mean by report or report card? Some school information systems separate the concept of reports, that's just data on the screen that tells you what's going on in your school, from report cards. And some of them don't. Some of them are going to charge additional, fees for different types of report modules and for storing report data. So it's really important to just define that. Most of them will have it, but you need to know what their definition of report is. And I've run into this a few times where I've been asked to work on something and someone's like, you know, we'd like an attendance report. I'm like, okay, so I would show them a sample, like this is your report, and it's a table and it has all the attendance information and it's easy to read. It's on the screen. They're like, no, we need a report that goes home to families. It's like, oh, you need a letter. You need a letter with the report data in it. So just clarifying report types, I think, is very important. If you, for any reason, have to do state and government reporting or any kind of like regular legal reporting for wherever you're at, and as an independent school, I'm assuming that you're probably not, but if you are, this is big. And your new school information system, if it can't kick out the right kind of reporting in the right format, that's going to be someone's full-time job, at least, you know, weekly or monthly. Someone is going to have to sit down and build these reports, and it's going to be very tedious. And I've already talked about payment systems. If you have one in place, your new one needs to to hopefully use the same one or use something similar. Alumni management, very few systems have built-in alumni management where they have a product that's included in their suite. Most of the stuff is an add-on. It's something to consider. You could probably move your teachers and students to a new system as frequently as you want. You can switch your learning management endpoint frequently, but you don't normally switch your parents and your alumni very frequently. So if you need a new alumni system, make sure it plays well with your SIS. So as students matriculate and graduate, they're just automatically created as alumni, and that whole process is smooth. And then finally, data exports for third parties. This is something that I do for schools sometimes, because some schools have older systems and maybe they're on Powerschool and they've upgraded and they've got these new features, but they still need to send data to these older systems that are living on their network. Maybe it's an emergency notification system or something like that. And the data coming out of the information system has to be formatted. Usually the problem is if you are hosting your own environment, so maybe you're running Blackbaud at your campus or Admin Plus at your campus, Powerschool on campus, you have a lot of control over how that data comes out of those systems and goes into other systems on your network. But if you migrate to the cloud, you lose a lot of that control. And now you have to figure out how to automate this data going into these third parties. Some systems have a lot of tools for that. Other systems do not. Most modern systems like Veracross have APIs that developers can use to interact with the system, pull data out, and put it into other systems. But those API endpoints for these systems, they have constraints. So you might be able to access 50% of the tables, but not all of the tables. So you need to consider how you're going to send data to third-party systems. Now, that's not really the SIS's responsibility. That's, in my opinion, your responsibility to go into the meeting with the salespeople and the customization people and say, we use these products and this is the format that they need the data in. This is how they take data from us now. How can we get that over there? You need to get as much information about that process as you can. Now, everyone runs into a wall eventually where some of these older systems have to go away because they can't be updated anymore. And most of these companies that sell school information systems, they feel like they're driving modernization. So they feel like that you should bend to their standard. I think that's really common. But in reality, most schools can't switch all of their systems all at once. So just when you're going through it, have a little bit of a long view so that you're like, okay, it's going to be maybe this new SIS meets all of our goals, but we have these two third parties that we're going to keep for 2 more years. So we'll just do the work manually every day to make sure that data is up to date. If you know you're phasing it out, I'm not saying it needs to be that important. But if you know you can't phase it out for 5 or 10 years, then it needs to be part of your calculation when you're looking at the switch. Okay. So these are kind of the things that I look at when I'm building that evaluation. And I would actually put all of my requirements in a spreadsheet and say, here's one product, maybe Powerschool or Blackbaud, and list all of the things that I needed to do. And then the next column would be Veracross or Powerschool, and I would go through and I would just score it. Can you do this? And then I would build a score sheet to help kind of guide my planning and see where my pitfalls are going to be. Now, I had a friend recently, their school has moved from Blackbaud to Veracross, and their only gap really is that they're using the Blackbaud, the financial module, the NXT module. That's their only gap. And so they're going to run Blackbaud side by side with Veracross for a year and give themselves a year to get off their finance module. So they're building that into their plan, but they did that gap analysis to figure out what they needed to do if they wanted to make the switch. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to jump over to this other slide. I can take any questions that you want, but at this point, we can also start just asking the group, what are your best practices for choosing and implementing a new SIS?
Well, I'll jump in. We did, my previous job, I was at a school where we switched from senior systems and we were looking at Veracross and Blackbaud. And we did an evaluation. We met with, in the tech department, with each of the different departments, academics, business office, development, and admissions, and just spoke with everybody and asked, what did they like about senior, what they did not like about the current system that we had, and what were some of the things that they wanted in the system. And then when we evaluated both products, we actually had Blackbaud and Veracross come in and gave at least a 1 hour to 2 hour demonstration of each module to the people in that department. So they got to see it and they all got to vote on it. So it wasn't, as a tech department, it wasn't our decision. It was an entire school decision. It came down, we chose Veracross. Across the board, most people, with the exception of the business office, liked Veracross better than Blackbaud. But they knew that having everybody on the same system was acceptable. So everybody was on board with where we were heading. But everybody got to see it ahead of time, and they got to vote and ask all the questions of the different companies, not just of us in the tech department.
And we don't just have to limit our thinking to school information systems. This evaluation model would also connect with other things. Like if you work in finance and you wanted to switch, how would you decide if you're going to switch from one finance system to another? Or if you work with alumni, like what are you going to look for if you're going to switch from one alumni system to another? The thinking process is very similar. The decision making is very similar.
So I'll jump in. I'm looking at the holistic system situation, not just the SIS, but I'm curious every time to see how are people making these decisions? What are they doing? What I keep hearing over and over again is this constant theme of meeting with each department to do a real needs analysis of what they're doing. What I would love to see or share, or I'm trying to develop, or what does that format look like other than the conversation? What are the questions people are asking? How do we elicit consistent answers while avoiding like that threatening, like, hey, I'm going to come in and change this? I get some of that is interpersonal, but what are good data questions to ask? I know how to work with people, I can do that, but I'd like to see some consistency in suggestions on questions. What are the interview questions you ask of each department to truly elicit the data answer you're looking for?
Yeah, I always, when it comes to building out any kind of report or something that's going to pull data from a system, I always try to start with, what questions or problems are we trying to solve? So, kind of imagining that we don't have a system at all, what questions or problems do we have that we would like to solve with technology? So thinking about things like, okay, we want to improve parent communication. Okay, is that really the responsibility of the SIS? Maybe it's not the responsibility, but how does the SIS connect to that process? And when we look at all the things we want to do we have, how many people does it take to do this? And how much of it can we automate? And does the SIS let us automate things so that we need to automate? Because one of these, kind of general concepts that a lot of the companies will sell to us is return on investment. If you get our system, you won't need to employ 1, 2, or 3 people because our system will do the work for you. And that's often not the case. If you end up doing like double data entry, you don't really reduce workload. You just increase someone else's workload, or you end up employing part-time staff to do certain types of data handling work. So all good. Anybody else?
One of the things that we did was we just we went to everybody and said, you know, what are your job functions? What do you do on a daily basis? What do you do every day, every week, every month? Ad hoc reports, just a list of your functions of things that you do, and that kind of built a template for, you know, looking at different software packages. Can they meet the needs of the things that we want? But also looking at the software, not getting stuck into, because I hated when you'd hear people say, well, that's the way we've always done it. Well, sometimes there's new ways to do it that are a lot better. So, you know, it's a balance between what we're doing and what does this new software have, and kind of balancing both. But you kind of have to start with where you're at. And so I think that's what we did when we met with everybody, is just, you know, take a look at what are your job duties every single day? What are the things that you need to accomplish on a regular basis? And how do we get the tools to help you do that? That was. Because I think from a data standpoint or technology, it wasn't our job to tell them what to do. It's our job to support them and help them do what they need to do. That I just always see it as a partnership. Like, what do you need to do every day? How can I help you do it? And that's kind of where we were coming from in our process.
So I have a question for everyone. At your campuses, if you were to implement an SIS and it went poorly, who is going to take the brunt of the community anger in that process? Where do you think that falls?
And in a falling down on the implementation or the shortcomings of the software? They could be two different.
I would like to think that people differentiate that. I'm not sure that they do. So we'll just say the shortcomings of the software. So, you know, you promised me A, I have B. What? Yeah. Who kind of owns that conversation when that happens?
I think our division heads might get it. Our technology director, but he's not really in the limelight. And it'll ultimately, I mean, depending on how bad it is, will go up the flagpole to the head of school. But we're in a situation where our finance office is using Finax and Rediker, and is concerned that it's not keeping up with the daily functions. But it does talk to our academics and our admission. Our academics, you know, is doing very well on Rediker. They get 95% accuracy on their scheduling, and they haven't been able to find that on other platforms. So, you know, I guess everybody has to give up a little bit, but they don't want to give up that much because that accuracy is so important to the student scheduling. And we haven't found that in these other platforms, Veracross, Blackbaud.
So in 2014, I completed Pearson's Master Schedule Builder workshop. So in that workshop, you learn how to do very large and complex schedules without software. So even though they owned Powerschool at the time, there was no software available. And going through that training helps you develop different methods for doing large amounts of scheduling, even if you don't have scheduling software. So one thing I think it's important to remember is that 20 years ago or 25 years ago or whatever, schools were big and complicated and they didn't have all the software. So sometimes we lose sight of the fact that if we have a workflow that works without technology, it might be slow, but it gets the job done on time. If we just apply a little technology to that workflow, it starts to get faster, right? So when it comes to scheduling, there's a couple of, I wouldn't say misconceptions, I would say mislabel. I would say it's intentional labeling by companies, but for us, it would feel like mislabeling. So there's timetabling software and then there's scheduling software. And the timetabling software is the graphical stuff that you see that doesn't put students into slots, but helps you like balance your courses out. And then from there, you can choose how the students go into those courses. But then full scheduling software, it takes all of your requirements and then it looks at your courses and all that information and it loads your kids into the classes for you. So it's far more complex.
Mhm.
If you have a way to determine what kids can go into what classes, because you've kind of got that math down and you've got a couple of people who work on it who really know the student body and the choices that they make, you really just need at that point really good timetabling software, and there's a lot of timetabling software. But the scheduling engines on the market for US schools, I mean, Powerschool, Blackbaud, Admin Plus, I don't really know very many other packages that do.
Right.
So all three of those have scheduling engines that are pretty powerful, but and they know that those companies know that you might keep their product just for scheduling. So, but I guess my point here is just understanding kind of the whole scheduling process without software, and having one or two people who do some specialized training in that really goes a long way to making a decision about how much software you need and how much automation you need. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to make a schedule for a high school with a whiteboard, but I can do it. Okay, but I don't want to.
Thanks.
All right, I'm going to jump over to this next topic. What kind of, and this came up in this point here with talking about staying consistent with data. How would you collect all of this data? So you're going to department meetings. What do you think the best practices for collecting data would be? Just considering your campus and your campus culture, what's the best way for people to approach collecting this type of data?
Google Forms is what we use. We actually listed out when we talked to people what their job functions are, list them all out, and had a list of them. So when we went to evaluate software, they could just go down the list and check off or make their notes about how this software does what they wanted. And then everybody ranked it on a scale. Each department got to rank Blackbaud and Veracross on a scale of 1 to 10, and we literally added up scores. And they had copies of all that, so they could see, when we made decisions because of what everybody in all the different departments rated the software on. So it was just basically Google Forms and Excel spreadsheets. So it was fairly informal, but we did have it kind of in a format where we could go back and review it. People could look at it and understand the process that went into making decisions.
Does that mean you only had those two you were evaluating? Like you approached it from the this or that situation?
Yes. Yeah. We also, because one of the things the head school wanted to have one system for the entire school. And so having different systems on different departments on different systems was off the board. So that very limited us to basically those two. We were on senior systems and we were going off it. So that was off it. Yeah, so there's a lot of it like Powerschool and other ones out there, but they don't have all the other modules. So we would have been siloed. And because of the way our school functioned and the people we had in the departments, I agreed that was the best choice for that school. I'm at a different school now. Here we have a lot of people with a lot better, I think the people we have with understanding of technology in those different departments is much greater here. So it's a lot easier to have people on different systems and keeping them communicating works better here. That would not have worked at a different school. So each school has to look at it for their own. Like I said, being one school on one system was a primary choice for that school, and for here we don't really necessarily need that.
So this just popped into my head. I mean, how are different campuses narrowing down the evaluation? Because and I don't want to tell too many stories because we're out of time because I have too many stories. But in 2010, I thought it would be amazing if all these teachers had some input on what kind of new projectors we were going to get. So I set up like 6 different classrooms with projector demos, and I invited, it was like 180 teachers, just go check out these rooms. And I'm not joking. It was like 25%, 25%, 25%. And then the rest were just fractionally spread. There was no decision that could be made off of off of the demos. And then everybody was just mad at me for not getting their projector, except for 25%. So I'm just kind of curious, how do we narrow down the, like, who's, I guess, who is the owner for this decision? So I believe in the agile scrum process for programming and running projects and just kind of generally getting my work done. And so in that concept, there's like a product owner, and that product owner reaches out, works with the stakeholders to kind of narrow down what needs to be done. So who's the product owner here? Who goes out and says, okay, there's 6 big products on the market. We need to get it down to 2. Whose job is that, do you think, in your organization?
I think at my school, it will be me initiating that process. And I think right now what I'm trying to determine is, are we still a best in class school, or are we an all-in-one school? And I genuinely don't know the answer. We've had a lot of leadership change, a lot of departmental change, you know.
What job title do you hold right now?
I'm sorry?
What job title do you hold right now?
I'm the Chief Technology Officer.
Okay, so I'll put CTO, I guess CIO,
Yeah.
like for me.
Yeah.
So anybody else? So like, I would agree, like it's my job to narrow this down. What about any other campuses? Do you have this ownership with another department?
So it depends, if it's an SIS LMS, then it is a database manager, which is myself. And the IT director, should be involved, but I believe teachers should be involved. I know you said that there was 25% return on your investment, so to speak, but teachers should be, otherwise they'll be very resistant to the change, and they should feel like they're part of this process. I know we started looking at different systems. We formed a committee a few years back, and COVID put an end to that, but the IT department was not even involved in that because they wanted teachers to feel like they were the one driving this, and their needs are going to be met. And because we have 3 divisions, and one of them is 3-year-olds through 4th grade, really, we did not come to a conclusion. It stopped dead, and we continued with Blackbaud. And we have so many systems that I feel data gets lost in between translation. We don't have an API with a lot of them. Business office is separate, RE is separate, alumni, I don't even want to go there. I would love to see it all in one place, but let's be serious. We're using something that alumni seem to like better. Although we don't have a lot of them logging in, while Blackbaud has, they have the alumni database, they can still log in. There's not a lot to see there. So it's debatable. I would love for teachers to be involved, because then they could be proud of what they chose and they'll go with it.
Switching gears just a little bit, the change management strategy for bringing in a new SIS. So after you've kind of made the decision and you want to move off of one system and into the other, what do you think are important points to remember for change management? For example, and I can delete this if you guys disagree with it, but I would say produce a roadmap with dates and deadlines. Just kind of giving everybody an idea of when things are supposed to happen and how long, kind of the older systems ideally will be in place. You never, I don't think I've ever hit 100% replacement. It's usually closer to 80%, and then that last 20% we might have to run longer than we thought. But what do you guys think about your change management strategies? Like, how do you get off of the one product and into the new one? What are essential things that you need to put into this planning?
I think you have to be intentional about the data movement and take that load off of the people who are going to have to work in the system. If you can get it there, they can learn to work with the data. But if that becomes a barrier, they're never going to move into that system because they're frustrated about the data movement.
What do you think about, let's just call it legacy system access? What kind of promise would you make? How much time will be available for, let's just say, people working on the business side of things, or principals, heads of school, etc., to log in and pull data out of the old system?
I think the longer you give them, the more time they're gonna take. They're gonna drag it out and forget to do it, and then complain that they didn't have enough time. So 2 weeks and you're up. Well, maybe not 2 weeks, but pretty close.
Okay. All right. We can add more to this one later. Let me jump over. And what do you think about this question? Is our need or drive to be on a single platform, is that good, or is that actually hindering us?
I thought when this all started that it was important to be on one platform system. But I wish that the integration was better, so we didn't have to be on one platform. So people didn't have to send Excel spreadsheets or Word documents. If integration was better between systems, it would be easier for us. But that isn't the case. So I don't know. I'd be interested in hearing what other people say about being on one platform system.
I think it all depends on the school and, the environment in the school, the people in the school, the level of expertise and technology within just the regular staff in the school. I think at my other school, I would say the technical ability of most people working in the system was on the low to moderate level. So for them, having one system was better. Here at the school, I think we have some people who have a much higher technical ability. So keeping things running on different systems is easier. So I think it's different depending on the school, and you have to make those decisions. One could be better than the other. But it's, in my opinion, from looking at, I've only been in schools for the last like 7-8 years, but looking at system, to me, Veracross was really the only truly one system platform. Even Blackbaud, who says they're one system, is really not. There are a bunch of systems that they're trying to connect in the background that they can do to, varying degrees of success. So if you want to have one system, then it's Veracross, in my opinion. So because everything else is kind of, to one degree or another, you're trying to integrate them somehow or another. And even Veracross isn't completely integrated with everything. So that there's different levels of integration. So you have to define that for what you need for your school.
Here's something else I think it's important to remember. Companies buy their companies. So you can buy into a platform and feel like you're going along and it's one platform that you love, and they can be purchased and now you're on 2 platforms. So this happens all the time, and even feeling secure with any of these vendors is tough. If they're not big enough in the market, they can be purchased pretty quickly by a larger vendor, just to take the customers, and then the platform will usually start to erode and be replaced.
I'm also experiencing that in the other way, where Powerschool, for example, is buying up lots of stuff and putting their name on it and calling it integrated. And that is a really generous definition of integration.
Yeah, they really just kind of integrate it into your license. That's it. Like they bought Haiku, they turned it into Powerschool Unified Classroom, made it worse, and then they bought Schoology. So now it's Schoology, and I don't even know if they've worked all that out.
They haven't.
This is something I actually try to recommend if people can afford it. So look at your SIS as your, your data storage or historical information, what produces your transcription and handles all the back end legal side of the business of running a school. And then look at your LMS as that attachment that needs to send data to it. It does need bi-directional data, like grades moving back and forth, attendance moving back and forth. But generally, there's a lot more LMS options on the market that are within the same price range. So if you get annoyed with an LMS because it's not keeping up and it's not offering good features, it's a lot easier to switch the LMS than the SIS. So having a good SIS that you have a core group of people who use it, they put up with the annoyances that it has, but it's part of their job every day, and generally they're going to have a higher skill set with it. Having that core group of people run your SIS, and then your community, especially your teachers and your parents and your students, they're really just touching the LMS day to day. If you can afford to do that, I think generally you have more flexibility as a customer. Sometimes though you pay double. So like for Blackbaud, I don't think you can negotiate with Blackbaud to lower the price of the core educational module if you don't use the LMS. You might be able to, but I don't think so. So if you just pay for Blackbaud, you pay for core, and then you put Canvas on the other side of it as an LMS and get the data exchanging, everyone's basically using Canvas every day except for a handful of people who are using Blackbaud. Now that is very expensive, but it's probably a better experience. And I know schools that do that with Powerschool. So they license Powerschool, they have Power Teacher Pro, they have all that, but they never touch it. They just use Canvas or something like Canvas on that other end. So the teachers and students, they never really have very much connection to Powerschool unless they want to log in and get like a final report card. So it's just something to consider, but it is very expensive to do that. And then here are just some miscellaneous things people wanted to talk about. So, question number one, who's using Finalsite? Now this said Finalsite, what are you using it for? I wasn't sure if you just meant the website or like all of their products, because they have just purchased School Admin, the admissions platform. So we're actually using Finalsite now because we use School Admin. But so everybody else, like if you're using any Finalsite products, what are you using?
We're using a lot of Finalsite. We're using the website, the messages, tools, the forums, kind of the portals. We got away from those. We might bring them back. So we're about to launch a redesign next week.
Are you using the admission portion of Finalsite?
So we switched to School Admin last year. So we're about a year in. And Tony,
How
it
is
sounds
that?
to well, School Admin part is actually great, but we were coming from Powerschool enrollment, which was basically InfoSnap, which was essentially a Google form. So
Right.
but it works better with the Powerschool integration. So I will tell you the caveat we ran into is if you were not a pre-existing school, Powerschool is not friendly to others sometimes. They've broken up with School Admin and they won't sell the API. So we are going to be manually moving this data, and the number of meetings I have had internally with the registrar about how many imports it's going to take for us to clean up the admissions data just because of human error and move that over is going to be, it's going to be great. The data is going to be great, but
who broke up with School Admin?
Powerschool, they won't allow the selling of that API that they have. So it is a manual export. We're back. So the admissions experience for families is great. But the data movement has gone from now great to 1,000 exports and imports that I have to figure out.
Yeah.
And the School Admin part with Finalsite is actually great because they both have really good customer support teams. So those things I can say actually were good transitions.
Yeah, go back to the directory. I've worked at 2 School Admin campuses and it's been good. However, we didn't use the direct integration with School Admin and Powerschool at my campus in Korea. We just had School Admin build a template that could auto load into Powerschool. So I worked with them on and off for about 4 weeks. And so that included some calculated columns. So when you downloaded the template, all the data would be not just in the right column, but in the right format for Powerschool. So then it was a quick import into Powerschool. So that's
Were
how.
you using contacts then, Tony?
No, I avoided
Uh-huh.
contacts like the plague,
Yeah.
so that's how I was able to do it.
Yeah.
I've been
Okay.
working on and off with the school now, trying to get contacts data into an old, like it's like a mid 2000s like SMS system, and it's tough. Contacts is tough for me. Like might be easy for other people, but pulling the data out of it's rough.
It's taken me a few years. I've learned a lot.
Let's see. Data transfer. So you said you were transferring data. Is this mostly just the spreadsheet based process you're following, or? So I think spreadsheets are pretty common for transferring data. There's also obviously SQL database. Scripting you can do sometimes.
Sometimes third-party integrators will SFTP the files back and forth and do the translating.
Now, one thing I could say about spreadsheets is, like, if you have to do a big data move with spreadsheets, you should program your spreadsheets. It's like a lot of anxiety to type in front of people. Program spreadsheets. Now, who's moved to Veracross? How did that work for moving data from whatever your system you were on to Veracross?
We did it with a lot. It was a lot of spreadsheets, exporting them out. They did give me a lot of scripts to run, SQL scripts to run in the background to get the data set up in the format to export to them. But after going through all that, I could have done it just with exports straighting out. We were in senior system, so I could had access to the tables and I could get everything. But it was filling out spreadsheets and sending to them and having it imported that way. But with the business office, we were able to give them a copy of our data and they were able to pull it out themselves. So we just loaded a whole backup of our database and they were able to pull out what they needed for the business office. They did that for the business office only.
I'm going to put this in here. Okay, so in a lot of SIS contracts, you get 1 or 2 data dumps, or Powerschool, I think, calls it a data pump, actually. You get those once or twice a year. And I recommend everybody do that. Just you can, I think even with Blackbaud, you can reach out to them and say, hey, we want to take an offline copy of our data. If you can get your data into one of these formats where it's all the tables and stuff are put into a single compressed folder and you need to make a move, sometimes you can send this over to the SIS you want to migrate to, and they'll do an evaluation and say, yeah, we can move this. No, we can't. We can move this much of it. These tables work, these don't, and it's really, really helpful. But also you just have a backup of your data. And normally it's in the contract that you can do this. People just don't request it and they don't follow up with you and say, hey, would you like a backup of your data this year? So it's something that I recommend you ask for. And even if it's like, I would say it's worth a couple $100 a year to pay for it if you have to. Just tell them that you want a backup that is not on in the cloud that it's in or on the server. So if you're running something locally, like maybe you're running local admin plus, they may say, well, you have backups. Say, yeah, I know, but I want a standalone compressed copy. We're going to put it on an external drive. We're going to store it in a safe. Just tell them that you want to do that. And if you get in that process, make sure you update that on any cyber security insurance paperwork that you do every year, because if you demonstrate that you're backing up and like you have your maybe your server backup and then maybe a cloud backup, but you also have 1 or 2 critical backups that are stored completely off your information system, completely off your network, it usually gives you a few points towards, you know, your risk level. So I think it's worth doing. Admin plus Rediker. What school information systems kind of align best if you've moved off of those? So I've said before, my previous school, we started a Powerschool move from Rediker. This was 2012, 2013, so quite a long time ago. So I haven't done it in a while. So this was a question someone posted. Any opinions on that? If you're on Admin Plus, what works as your next SIS? Is this what we're saying? No one can save Admin Plus? So I'll list the systems that I know that have good scheduling, which I've mentioned before, but scheduling, obviously, Powerschool, Blackbaud. What else is there anything else out there anyone's used that has a really good scheduling engine for taking requests, balancing requests, and loading the kids into the schedule?
Well, you know, it has nothing to do with your question probably, but we do use Class A for, so that wouldn't be something on our wish list. We use Class A for scheduling for the upper school. And that works just great for us.
It's called Class what?
Class A, and it's, I mean, it's not integrated, but it does allow import and export from Blackbaud into Class A and back.
Like this?
It was just beautifully.
Am I spelling it correctly?
Yes,
Class?
you are. And there's no
Okay.
Yeah,
dash.
it's called Class A Scheduler. It's a third-party software.
It is.
If you can
Okay.
get the guy to answer you, some guy wrote the software for a school a long time ago. I've emailed him several times and he never answers, but
I did hear from a lot of people that he's not responsive, and I think he's one man and
yes,
the company is too big for him to handle.
yes. It's one guy who wrote the software and it works really well. We use it here at the school. And it's a nice little system, but if you have it and it works, it's great, but it's not something you can really count on. Yeah, Veracross does have a built-in scheduler. It's not something you can buy standalone. If you're a Veracross school, they do have a scheduling module built into their SIS that can help build your schedule for you. It works pretty good. It's a pretty decent engine, but again, it's only within their own system.
Yeah, I think the main issue that I've heard schools complain about with the Veracross scheduling is that it lacks so many features compared to the others that it just can't handle the complexity of their schedule.
Okay.
Which is why they end up running the 2 systems just so they have scheduling. Now, for some people, this doesn't matter. Again, for other people, it does. That's why it's just kind of important it's not just, do you have scheduling when you're making these decisions? It's how complex can we get with your scheduling? Like, what can your scheduler do? And when you look at some of these packages like Power Scheduler, if you do training on Powerschool, you won't do any training with Power Scheduler. It's completely separate software. Some schools don't use it at all. And when you get into it, you do need to understand how Powerschool works, but it's its own environment. And it's its own environment because Powerschool purchased it and incorporated it a long time ago. Like when Powerschool was owned by Apple, Apple purchased it, and it was a standalone product that worked with Powerschool through an import-export process, and then they acquired it, integrated it. So that's, again, that's a scheduling platform built into the SIS, as opposed to an SIS that has some scheduling features. And it's just really, again, balancing this out. So if you switch to Veracross and you know that Class A scheduler works and it can meet your needs, then, that's great. It's just not getting caught believing that you have these features when you don't have them seems to be something that we need to really reiterate for schools, because until you actually do your first schedule, you don't really know what you're lacking. And I think it's very hard to do the schedule when you're evaluating the SIS. You could test almost every other piece of the SIS, but testing the scheduling is pretty difficult, because really to test it, you need a percentage of requests, and you need to have your course catalog set up. You need to have your courses set up so that they know how many kids they can have. Like, you basically have to build your school. So you're not really going to do that in a demo. And you can run demos of schedulers where you could say, hey, Veracross, I want to see an actual demo of your scheduler. But, seeing that complexity, it's kind of difficult. And you may need to change your schedule later on. And so you want to make sure that there's not just complexity, but flexibility in the options that you can change. So it's just one of those points was, I think, should be very high up on the selection list. If you're doing scheduling and you have a lot of automation in it, you're gonna need to be able to do that, or it's really gonna cripple your operations. All right. We have just a few more minutes. Are there any other topics? Does anybody else want to make any other comments? Was this helpful? Do you want to ask any specific questions, like, do you like this or do you not like this, to anyone? I think it's safe for everybody to express their opinion.
Sure. Is there someone that uses one system? If you are a school like we are with 3 divisions, 3-year-olds through 12th grade, is there a school that uses one system for all 3 divisions? And is that working for them? We do have Seesaw for lower school and Blackbaud middle and upper school, and also Google Classroom. Ideally would like, because of parents that have multiple children in multiple divisions, it makes it difficult for them to navigate through their kids' school life. So would that be, is there anything out there that you recommend, or is anybody that uses just one and it kind of works? Just ideas. It doesn't have to be like, yes, this is it, buy it. And
I mean, my school isn't just using one system for at the classroom level. And on the back end, the offices, how they're doing attendance, all of that is actually one system. So, but past attendance, it's not. So we take attendance in one system, we collect our core information in one system, but we use Seesaw, we use Google Classroom, and then the older students use the Blackbaud LMS.
okay, so it's pretty close to what we have, and that's a normal thing.
Tony, is it you that is using the final site or someone else? I have a question about it. I was wondering, how do you communicate to the parents or to the student body when you want to send out specific information or upcoming events? Does it go through just an email or?
So we're only using, as far as I know, within our renewals, we're using school admin, which Final Site purchased. So that's why we're using Final Site. We're using one of their products now, but we're not using their website. So we're using we're using Blackbaud, but not their stock website. So the school had Blackbaud build them a bespoke website. They had them fully customize it. And the way we do communication is within our student body, it's all running through Google Groups. All the students get notified through Google Groups. Parents get notified actually two ways. All the parents are in Google Groups, but also within Blackbaud, there's communication groups set up. So parents get messages from teachers through Google Groups, but they get messages from like the business office and alumni management, all that comes out of Blackbaud, and newsletters go out of Blackbaud. That's how that's working right now. And I was looking last year at School Messenger, I believe, to really kind of clean all that up. And I'm going to revisit that again this year, because managing Google Groups with non domain accounts is annoying. And what happens is, you know, the Blackbaud groups, the Blackbaud groups are actually very up to date, because when parents change their information in school admin, which is their core area where they maintain their personal information, it updates to Blackbaud automatically, and that updates the group. But the Google groups have to be manually updated. So that only really happens, I think they're synced once a month, like resynced.
Wow.
So they're always off, and I don't really like that. But I think School Messenger would be a good product, but I need to look at it a little bit more.
Thank you.
I can also address that question. Unfortunately, it's gotten very noisy where I am, so I apologize. We are using actually School Messenger and Final Site Messages. And we're using them distinctly different, but we have data flow to both of them, which is quite nice. So School Messenger, teachers are actually using this year to send messages and reminders to their classrooms. So we use School Messenger feeding directly from Powerschool for notification only items, dynamic lists that are, it's just kind of informational, or hey, it's a dress down day tomorrow, or inclement weather, things like that. We use messages. So sorry, let me back that up. School Messenger can do newsletters. The editor is more cumbersome, and it's just not as modern as people probably prefer. So we use the messages in Final Site for our weekly newsletter, our head of school message, things that are more marketing promotional, and we need to look a little better and also integrate with our website, because we do use the Final Site website.
Thank you. That's good to hear.
And then I can add the piece which we've not made good use of yet, but because of the school admin integration, the groups from school admin feed into the groups in Final Site. So in theory, for example, we could send out a Christmas letter to prospective families, because those groups have come in, as well as current families, all through Final Site. So we haven't taken advantage of that yet. Those groups are secretly there, but we're, like I said, we're only a year into school admin, or in our first year. But I can see that that's where that's going if we were targeting constituent groups that aren't explicitly enrolled yet.
Wonderful. Okay. Thank you.
Is anyone on this call in Office 365 school or Azure school? Do you find that their groups for parents are better?
How do you mean?
Well,
Big.
because Microsoft has the ability at certain tiers to actually add non-domain users as trusted members of the community, where you get more features.
So we haven't gone down that road. What I've been working, as we migrated actually to Powerschool contacts, we use that time to really define who receives school communications. And one of our data flags now is if you have a data access account, you then receive communications from other systems. So it's almost self-enrollment, because the data feed is all based off that one data flag.
Okay.
So you aren't entered into Final Site if you haven't granted access to your students' data. Like
Okay.
by you creating that account. So we made that authoritative. So we didn't have to go in that road. We're Google and Microsoft, but we did explore like Google Groups briefly years ago, but the maintenance was like, oh, let me find a better
Yeah,
way.
I inherited the Google Groups and
Yeah.
I'm looking for kind of the best alternative. And I have worked at two fairly large Office 365 Microsoft backend schools. And that's why I was curious. It's not part of the free license, as far as I know. Like, we have to upgrade our license, but they do let you take a list of people with any email and say these are trusted members, and then you can put them on SharePoint, you can put them on forms, you basically can verify their identities with their personal email. That's really what you're doing. So I was just curious. I've played around with it a little bit with teams, setting up teams for like the booster club and stuff. I was able to, with our free license, that I forget how many people you get. It's not a lot, but it was enough for a test to put some people in the booster club in a team with people from the school, and they don't show up as guests, they show up as their person.
It makes sense. I think we went down a little bit of the teams road. Like, it's like you go down a little of those roads and then realize the management becomes silly.
Yeah.
And if you can find a way to flag families immediately, I was like, this person should get communication, and that can auto feed into systems, then I backed out of that other management business.
Yeah, I think that's where Powerschool is really strong, though. It's, the Powerschool API lets you send data to basically any system. So. And please don't clip that and say, look, he's recommending Powerschool. It's not a product recommendation. I'm just, just stating what I know about the system. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I'm gonna stop the recording, and then I'll get all this processed out today. And except for adding like a little bit of fade up and fade out, I'm not going to edit it. So generally, I will put this on my YouTube channel and just send everybody a link, and then you can share it. And then if you're on the call, you have access to the Jamboard. I'm gonna make I'll make a copy of the Jamboard to have a backup. And if you want to edit it for some reason, just send me an edit request and I'll just give you permission to edit it. All right. So if there's nothing else, thank you for joining. I hope this was useful, and I'm hopefully gonna, whenever any interesting topics come up, I'll offer a webinar, and we'll see how it goes. And hopefully over the course of like a year, we'll have like a decent collection of information we can share.
Thank you so much. This was very informative.
All right, great.
Thanks,
Thanks for
Tony.
hosting.
Thanks for hosting.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Yeah.